I'm your host, Greg Villafana, and we've partnered up with our friends at NPP to deliver short business tips each month. Having expertise in the swimming pool industry and business world, we believe these messages will truly help your business. So without further ado, let's jump into this month's business tip.
Welcome to your go-to podcast for the pool and spa industry. My name is Tyler Rasmussen.
And my name is Greg Villafana. And this is the Pool Chasers Podcast.
So today we're joined by Laura Dunbar, and we're talking about recruiting good talent. So welcome, Laura.
Thank you so much for having me.
Yeah. So can you tell the listeners a little bit about yourself and maybe what your role is with Patriot and now NPP?
Absolutely. So my husband Hal and I started Patriot Pool and Spa in Austin in 2006.
Talking about Hal Denbar, like the Hal Denbar?
The Hal Denbar, if that's what he goes by. So yeah, we started it out just no experience and sort of built it over a lot of years. I didn't have a whole lot to do with the business for the first decade or so, while it was really kind of growing from a one-man show into, a larger gig. And then my kids got older and they went to kindergarten, first, second, third grade, and I started getting an itch to do something. And at that same time, we lost a significant portion of our employees over the course of about 3 weeks, just kind of May of the pool season. They just kind of quit one right after the other for a little bit. And Hal really called me and said, you know what you could do? You could come hire people for us. We really need that. And over the course of just kind of figuring that process out, I realized that we really kind of needed an HR person. We were at the size of company where we really couldn't bring one on full time in a capacity, but we could certainly train me up well enough to know enough about it. So I did that for about 2.5 or 3 years before we ended up selling. And then I went back to staying home and I thought, well, that'll be fine. It was a nice run. And then very quickly I got, what would you say? Bored is one word, restless. And so luckily NPP called me back and said that they had an opening as a recruiter. I had only ever recruited for Patriot. So I didn't really know much at all about recruiting, but I knew a lot about hiring pool people and what this industry is, what people are looking for in their jobs. And so I have had just an absolute ball the last 6 months or so recruiting for national pool partners. And now there are 4 of us who are specializing in recruiting, and we're really, really just having a great time meeting people, getting people plugged into jobs that they can be proud of and that they enjoy.
Right. Well, thank you for sharing all of that. And I want to know, when you first started hiring with Patriot, were you really good at it, like right from the beginning, or did you just have a little bit of a struggle in the beginning, but you just kind of constantly kept going back to the drawing board and kind of, reconfiguring how you were gonna, conduct interviews or just find talent?
So I would say that I've always been a people person. I'm good at connecting with people, especially one-on-one, just kind of forming relationships. I would say I'm terrible at details. So the concept of keeping track of all of the different people coming in the door and what their needs are and what they were looking for, those things really took me by surprise, and I had to form processes that worked for me at that point. And again, coming on to NPP, I didn't have any doubt that I could hire people for the job. I questioned if I'd be able to keep track of them all in some sort of organized way, working for multiple pool businesses. And it's taken some work, and I've really put in a lot of time and effort, and my colleagues, some of whom have really significant recruiting backgrounds, have shown and shared with me their best practices, and they've done me real solid in doing that. But I didn't have a problem connecting with people. I found that pretty easy to do. And I actually love so much that this industry is full of real people who want to kind of come in and do a job well and make the connections, to feel like they're being valued and to feel like they're valuable to the company that they're working for. I find that really admirable.
Right. Very good. So let's jump into making a good impression. We had some different talking points that we put together prior to this interview, and I really like the idea of making a good impression. Oftentimes, a candidate can feel most of the pressures of being interviewed, and not necessarily maybe on the business. So, can you touch on that a little bit?
Absolutely. I feel very strongly that one of the things I learned quickly at Patriot was that you can hire in two different manners. The first manner is asking the employee to prove themselves to you, why it is that you should hire them. And that's valid in a lot of cases. Certainly, if you have somebody who's a repair tech, for example, who should have skills that they need in order to be functional in the company's organizational structure, you need somebody who actually knows repair. You can't just hire somebody who wants to know repair all the time and train them up, although you can do that as well. So the idea for a lot of businesses is, what can you do for me as an employee? Why should I hire you? What we've seen since COVID especially is that this hiring environment is much different now. People stayed home. They figured out over a period of time what it is they want from their work-life balance, from their day-to-day, how they want to spend their time. And sometimes a lot of people have just had a hard time going back to work and really figuring out what that looks like for them. And so what I believe that I've really started to focus more on is, it's a symbiosis. It's a combination of, can they do the job we want them to do? But also, what is it that we're offering to them that gets them to leave what they're doing and come on board with us? And so the idea that we're both kind of proving ourselves, the company and the employee, what do we both have to offer? And is this a relationship that would be a good fit? Almost like dating, almost like I'm bringing something to the table and so are you. And is this a good match? I think looking at it that way, in my opinion, has given us access to really great talent that are coming in that are like, I've already proven myself in the 15 years, for example, I've done this in this industry, and now I'd really like to see where I can go from here. I think that that's been really beneficial for us to see it that way.
Yeah, and I think all of that is must and very important. What do you think about, I guess, the little things like, being prepared, having a good attitude, smiling, making sure, say, the bathrooms are clean and that the culture is intact? Because if somebody's coming, say, to an interview at your warehouse, your office, wherever it may be, and they see that things are, messy and dark and the people don't look happy, and you're kind of checked out, it's like, yeah, this is sort of a template, piece of paper document that I go through and I ask the same questions every time. I could see that being, very unmotivating, and, you don't want to waste their time. You don't want them wasting yours. But, you want to make a good impression.
Absolutely. And I should say that from an owner, sort of HR standpoint, when I was at Patriot, it gets tiring having multiple interviews a week, right? And people don't show up, or they show up and they don't follow through with the offer. I mean, it's a long race. It's a marathon, not a sprint, right? And so it does get a little disheartening at times for people in their companies doing that. And so I do very much understand that. What I would say though is that from the employee, from the candidate standpoint, your first impression for them is important because you're asking them to come on board with their livelihood. They're walking in and saying, this is where I will spend the majority of my day when I'm not sleeping. It will be here at this place. And an overhaul of culture is a big job, but a clean bathroom and a smile and a bottle of water and, hey, come on in here and let me meet some people, let you meet some people, that is not hard. That is something you can very easily put in place immediately. And if it's, the other thing I would say too to this point is, question who at your business is doing the interviewing, and are they the right person for that seat? So if you hate interviews, but you just don't know if anybody else would do them, ask your people. Does somebody love the idea of coming in and meeting people first? And can you make a template, for example, where you know how to you know how to ask the questions and you know what questions to ask. And maybe you aren't the person to be doing the interviews. It's okay to let that go. It's okay to trust your people to do that. And especially if it takes some stress off of everybody. So.
Right. And I think that, people are drawn to a sort of energy that can be in any establishment. When you go into maybe a new startup, and there's just people moving around, they're smiling, they're high-fiving, and, they're making calls, and they're kind of, when you're in the presence of that energy, people want a piece of that. And I've noticed that from being around a lot of different businesses, not just in the pool industry, but other places where you're like, I don't know what the hell goes on here, but I can feel it. It feels really good. And I think that there's something to be said for that. When it's real stale in a business, moves aren't being made, things aren't being done. And I think it's getting more competitive now. Somebody can very well leave there and go into Patriot or go into another, pool company, and it's going to be, night and day. And of course they're going to go with, with another one. So very good stuff.
Absolutely. I think the pool industry is evolving just like every other industry, and just like time does, things change, and what people are looking for in employment, I think, has changed over the last 20 plus years, right? There are people who will still come in and say, I just want to grind it out and make good money, and that's what I want from my work. And now we see a younger subset of newer people to the industry who are saying, that isn't all I'd wish for. I'd really wish for a culture where I could feel like it feels, at least fun, if not joyful and exciting to be coming to work most days. And I think missing out on that culture building really is going to affect potentially your ability to find good, hungry young talent who wants to grow and really make something in the industry, because that is very important to a lot of people nowadays.
Yes, very much so. And, if the hire is made, what do you suggest for training? That's part of that checklist, that onboarding checklist. So how do you suggest, people kind of kicking that off?
Man, training is, I'll tell you what,
easy,
right? We struggled with training for a long time. I've seen several different ways to do it. We've done several different things at Patriot to try to figure out what our best training is. The number one thing I could say is, and this is in general, but find the people that's their strength. And, we call it, right, and I'm sure other people call this right people, right seats. So find the right person for that seat and put them in it and trust them to do the training, because you can have all of the processes that you want, and those are very important. But really having somebody who can connect with those new people to the industry is so important, because that's their that's their entry into a new trade. And it's wonderful if you have people on your team who take pride in training other people, because that just makes it nice for everybody.
Yeah. And I think that's where, whatever form and paperwork they need to fill out needs to be, very in depth, even with those references and calling them, where it's like, oh, did you know they're colorblind? Oh, shit. That's a problem, because knowing what blue looks like, and when you're testing chemistry, that's kind of a big part of what we do, right? But there's all kinds of things, because if you're expected to drive a lot, or here in Arizona, you could see weather from 110 to 115 degrees. And if you've been used to working in an office for a long time, this is definitely not going to be a good fit. In fact, it's going to be very hazardous and unhealthy, because it's totally different than being in an office setting. So maybe knowing where to recruit these people as well is very important.
Absolutely. So there's two things that come to mind, and I'm specifically discussing people that have never been in the industry before. So I kind of categorize them into two groups. One is someone who has experience working outside. So whether that's landscaping or pest or any version of that, right? We know that those people are aware of what it is to work in the elements. So that's a very, very big leg up because the elements are without a doubt the number one reason I would say people don't stay in the route tech position,
100%.
in the cleaner position, because they just cannot handle or don't want to handle the weather that they're asked to. So let's say you get past that and you say, okay, they are going to be able to handle that, or we think that they will. The other thing I really think is important to ask them is if they've ever worked independently. How likely are they to be a good self-motivator? So, once you get on your solo route and you're out there by yourself, can you stay on task? Can you check details without someone looking over their shoulder? And I always use this example specifically with people coming from, for example, food service, where they've been working a line in a kitchen for many years, and they are fast-paced and they are capable of making things happen. But that is a very different role than the role of a pool tech who is out in the field on their own day after day. And so those key indicators for me, asking the right questions and listening to their response and their answers, tells me a lot about how likely they are to be successful in this job.
Very good. And how can you motivate employees to refer your business for new talent? And I really like this one because I think there's a lot of different ways and opportunities that people can do that.
So there are two things I think about asking people to refer people they know. One is pay them, pay them a referral fee, and you can determine what that is. Some I've heard some that are very, very generous, and others that are a small one-time fee. And thank you for the referral. And certainly, that's always nobody's not a fan of money, so that's a good option. The other option really goes back to the culture piece. It's who do we want to be working here? Who do you want to work next to you? And it's better to work with people you like than it is to work with people you don't. And so that's kind of the other sales point that I often try to make to employees is we're hiring either way. So if you have somebody that's looking for work, send them our way. And employer referral, it's really very popular in a lot of the businesses I've worked with in the pool industry. We see a lot of employer referral. I mean, we typically see the majority of our recruiting from sources like Indeed, but employer referral is second on that list. And then really surprisingly, third would be like walk-ins off the street. A lot of different companies will just have somebody show up and say, I'd like a job. Are you hiring? So those are kind of the three main avenues that I see over and over again.
Love that. And did you ever have conditions on the referral program? Like they need to, be with you for 6 months or anything like that?
Sure. I think that makes sense from a business standpoint. So at Patriot, for example, our employee referral fee was and still is $500 after 90 days. So, and it goes to the person who referred the employee. Once the employee is hired on and they've been with us for 90 days, the referring employee receives a $500 one-time bonus. Other places, I've seen it different amounts, but I generally think 90 days is about the least amount of time I would probably consider fair for a referral. Otherwise, you could have people coming and just quitting the next week and they've already received $500, and that's can be a little tricky sometimes.
Right. Yeah. I think $500 is very generous. It's probably more than I've heard of, but it's well worth it if it all works out, So what do you think the best way is to document the hiring process?
So this is interesting. When I was with Patriot in a small business format, definitely did not document as well as I do now, having learned some tricks of the trade. So, the best way I found for myself, and again, I'm not someone who's great with technology and details and that kind of thing. I just started a basic Excel spreadsheet. And really what I do is I document all of the interviews on there. And then I document, what was the date of the interview? Did we extend an offer to them? If we did, do they end up getting hired on? if we didn't, did they decline? Did they no show? What was the reason we didn't extend one? And a simple spreadsheet like that is more than sufficient to make sure that you're keeping track of everybody. And then add another page to it that says, okay, these are the people that actually got hired. What was their start date? Did they have a bonus in place? Okay, when is that bonus due? And just kind of keeping track of it that way. You don't need to get really fancy with it. I mean, it's just really notating the things that you've promised them, right? Like bonuses. If you've promised them that, make sure you take a note of that. We've had instances where we have, not kept up with those bonus dates, and all of a sudden somebody who's very aware they're supposed to get $500 at 90 days comes knocking and says, hey, that was supposed to be last week. And that's a terrible feeling, right? To know that somebody, earned something that you forgot to put on their payroll. So those are things you really want to try to get good at, just keeping track of.
Yeah. I mean, you make a good point, even if you're not great at technology, but, do what you can if, writing it on a piece of paper and putting it in a manila folder and filing it. If you're good at that, I guess stick with it. That's all we can do. Cause I know a lot of people, I used to be so 100% on technology, but over the years, I have just ran into people that are phenomenal at what they do and that do not use any technology. And what I would suggest if you are writing on paper is probably have somebody get that into a spreadsheet of some type or something. But I think that whatever it takes to get the job done, just have a process and make sure, like you said, that you're doing what you said you were going to do.
I think that incremental change is all you need. You don't have to have an overhaul of your entire hiring system. If you're writing things on paper, I see companies still this day that have an application and their interview questions are written down on paper and they do file it. Hey, we had an interview with this guy and he did get hired, so it goes in his file. That's totally fine if that works for you. However, there are many, many relatively easy ways to keep that information on the computer. And if that's not for you, I would say there's somebody in your office who probably knows how to do that. And so it's a really good idea to kind of have them start showing you little ways you could keep that information there. And the other thing I'd like to say is like something like a computer, it's hit or miss, but if you have files on your employees somewhere, there's a little bit of a concern that who can access those files, right? And what kind of information can they get from them? Just like you have to have security on your computer, you really need to make sure that you have some form of security in the filing that you have for your people.
Yeah. I mean, that is a podcast all in itself, is how to label digital assets, because I know I got frustrated with this a long time ago, and I think it's something that everybody should look into because it is unique to your business and your skill sets. But, having a pretty much an org chart of, say, your Dropbox files and how you label assets and where you put them, because, say, for hiring, sometimes this just happens fast. Somebody walks in and say that there's kind of a sheet that you go off of and you might manipulate it a little bit, but sometimes we forget, well, I can forget because I don't do it anymore, but I do remember that these things just happen so quickly that you need to have access to things quickly, and you need to know what to do after, the interview is done quickly. Or if it's like, what do I do with this, all the notes that I took on this, and we are going to move forward. Like, what happens after that? Who do I give it to? Am I going to do it? How do I remind myself that I'm going to do it? So I think having all those, things in places, that you have to have it.
It's really, I think one of the things I've learned the most in watching how companies, pool companies run, is hiring a lot of times feels separate from the running of the day-to-day of the company. It's like, oh, we got to find more people, but here are all these other things that still have to happen daily for this company to run. And, the thing I think that is a good idea is to kind of realize that hiring is just like anything else. You need to have processes in place for it so that you don't lose track of it in the daily, scuffle and give and take of the crazy days that we go through, employees walking in and out and needing this and needing that. And here's an interview that came in that you didn't even know was going to happen. And now you're like, well, I don't want to do this interview. And it's really important, if you want to build your company with quality talent, that you look at those interviews as opportunities to find people who, you might miss out on if you're not prepared to sit there and really focus on it. And so that really kind of leads me back to the idea of like, find somebody who enjoys doing that or is good at it. They don't even have to enjoy it, but if they're good at it and they can focus on it, let them own that whole piece. And so the more that you can give to the people within the company and allow them to manage and own certain pieces of it, it just frees up time for everybody to grow the company.
Right. I just thought of something when you were saying all that. I'm not sure if you know, or I definitely don't know, but do you think that women might be better at hiring, say for a pool service technician? Because I have to admit, I don't think that me personally, I wasn't the greatest, because I don't know if I could empathize with every little thing, or maybe some of the excuses are hold up, or maybe they're just holding things back. Whereas, a female might be able to get more legitimate answers or whatever it may be. What do you think about that?
I don't know if women are better at hiring. I think that I've seen some really, really great people, men and women, that have hired and have a really good rapport with people right off the bat. I certainly could see a world in which people coming into an interview and sitting down, with a woman across from them, maybe feel a little more comfortable. I don't know if that's true or not, but I think there are other people who would probably think that I want a pool guy sitting across from me. I'm a pool guy. I want a pool guy sitting across from me, talking to me about things. So I think there's two sides to that. And I haven't seen any difference in my world that shows that I'm better at it than anybody else.
Yeah. So before we wrap this up, did you have anything else that you wanted to add?
Yeah, I think the two things come to mind. One is when you talk about recruiting, I don't always look at that as something from outside of the business. I think part of recruiting includes recruiting your people that are actively already working with you, or if you are someone working within a company, your desire to move upward, your desire to move into a different maybe seat in that company, that's also recruiting, right? And as a business owner or someone who is managing a business, you really do yourself a big favor in looking at your people and determining, hey, I don't necessarily need to hire an outside repair tech. Who's hungry and wants to learn repair? Do I have time in the next season to teach them basic repair so that they can move up in the company? Those kind of things I also consider recruiting and hiring internally. And I think it's very important to consider that. I really think, in my experience, companies that look first within and find ways to move their people up, retain their talent longer than companies who hire outside for everything. So that's one thing I would say I think is a really good idea. Instead of looking at your organizational structure and your org chart and saying, here are the holes I need to fill, find bodies to fill them. If you take the time to look at people in your company and people who want to be employed in your company, or if you are the person going out and looking for a job, it is totally valid and right to want to find a company that values you and that wants you to succeed and to do well and is going to treat you fairly. And I think as either owners or managers, if you're running a company, you cannot do better by your people than making sure that they know that you are that they are valued and that you appreciate the job that they're doing. And then if you're looking for work in the industry and you really are unsure of, if there's any place that will ever treat you well, or if you feel like you've been burned before and you don't really know if it exists, a company that will hear you and help you achieve your goals. I know many companies out there that do that. They do exist in this wonderful industry, and I think it's worth taking the time to seek them out.
Very good. Well, thank you so much, Laura. This was all really good information. Know everyone will benefit from listening to it.
Thank you so much for having me.
You're welcome.
Yeah.
Thank you so much for listening. If you'd like to learn more, you could hit the link in the show notes below or visit poolchasers.com. If you'd like to learn more about NPP, visit go-mpp.com. See you out there, pool chasers.